When I got fired, my aunt turned my resume mistakes into a church life lesson on failure, then said God humbled me so others could learn. So I sat there quiet until I exposed the secret she thought I'd never tell the whole church. I was sitting in the third pew at New Hope Baptist Church in Dayton, Ohio, trying to keep my face still while my aunt, Pastor Denise, told the entire congregation how God used my failure to teach humility. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew I was the nephew who had just gotten fired from the logistics company off I-75. Everyone knew I'd been desperate to get back on my feet. Everyone knew I'd trusted her when she asked for a copy of my resume so she could pray over it. I thought she meant silently at home, not wave it around in front of 200 people on a Sunday morning. But that's exactly what she did. She stood up there, holding my resume like it was a prop in a drama skit, pointing to the parts she claimed were examples of how pride leads to carelessness. Then she read one of my typos out loud, the stupid one where I wrote manger instead of manager, and people actually laughed. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I'd throw up. I kept my eyes down on the hymn book, acting calm, but inside I was spiraling. She went on, voice rising like she was giving the sermon of her life. She said God stripped me of work because I needed to be brought low so others could learn obedience. She even said I should thank him for this humiliation. Humiliation. She used that exact word. My mom, sitting next to me, stiffened but didn't move. She hates conflict. My cousins shifted around in the choir loft, whispering, trying to look anywhere but at me. My aunt kept going, talking about how the young people in this family forget discipline, and how she hoped my setback would remind everyone to stay humble and stay correctable. I felt my face heat up. It was that type of heat that comes from shame and rage mixing together until you don't know whether you're going to cry or explode. I'd been holding everything in for weeks. Losing my job, losing my apartment, feeling like a screw-up, but hearing her twist my pain into a sermon was the moment something broke. And maybe she thought I wouldn't say anything because I never do. I've always been the one who stays quiet, apologizes too fast, forgives too easily. The good nephew. But she forgot something. She forgot what happened 8 years ago. She forgot what I saw. And she forgot that I kept the one thing she didn't know I still had. So I waited. I didn't interrupt her sermon. I didn't storm out. I didn't cause a scene yet. I just sat there, breathing slow, while she wrapped up her lesson by saying she hoped the one who needs this message most receives it with a grateful heart. Then she looked straight at me, held the stare, smiled. Something in me clicked into place. Not anger, not panic, something colder. Because if she wanted a life lesson, I could give her one. When the service ended and people started gathering for the after-church fellowship in the basement, I walked up to the microphone stand she'd been using. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. Everyone turned to look. My aunt froze halfway down the aisle, and I said, "Since we're talking about honesty and humility, there's something I think the church needs to know." Her face changed so fast I almost laughed. She knew exactly what I was about to bring up. She just didn't know I was finally ready to burn her entire lie down. To understand why my aunt's face drained of color the second I stepped up to that mic, you need the full picture of who she is and how our family worked growing up in Dayton. Pastor Denise wasn't always pastor. She used to be just my aunt. The strict one, the loud one, the one who acted like everything she touched turned holy. When I was a kid, she ran the household like the church even before she had a church. My cousins and I spent every weekend at her place because my mom worked long shifts at the hospital. Aunt Denise loved being in charge of us. She'd snap her fingers and we'd move. She'd say God told her something, and that was the end of the argument. And the thing is, for a long time I looked up to her. She was confident. She spoke like she knew the secrets of the universe. She made everyone feel like she held their future in her hands. When my uncle, the one married to her, left her for a woman he met at his job in Columbus, something changed in her. She got harder, meaner. She started preaching in living rooms before she ever stepped into a real pulpit. She told everyone God was refining her. But she was really just pissed, and bitter, and desperate for control. By the time I graduated high school, She'd gotten a small congregation together. My mom was proud of her. I was too, in a way. But the closer I got to adulthood, the more I could see the cracks in her holy image. When I was 19, I helped her clean out the old community center the church rented. She trusted me because I was quiet, dependable, the kid who listened instead of talked. She sent my cousins home early and asked me to finish sweeping the office. That's when I found the envelope, wedged behind the filing cabinet. At first, I thought it was just paperwork. But when I picked it up, it fell open. And inside were checks. Dozens of them. Checks from church members labeled as donations for mission work. Checks that were supposed to go toward a youth retreat she'd been fundraising for all summer. Checks made out to the church but signed over on the back in her handwriting. I didn't even understand the full weight of it at the time. I just remember my stomach dropping, like I'd done something wrong by touching them. I put them back exactly how I found them. I didn't say a word, but she knew I'd seen them. The moment I came out of the office, the way she looked at me, sharp, assessing, suspicious, told me everything. She didn't yell. She didn't explain. She just asked, too calmly, "See anything interesting in there?" I lied and said no. She stared at me for a full 3 seconds, then nodded like she just measured something in me and found it useful. Or weak. After that, she treated me differently. Nicer in a fake way. Overly sweet. Like she was keeping me in her pocket. But she also made sure I understood my place, that I owed her support, respect, loyalty. She said things like, "You're special. God trusts you." But it never sounded like a compliment. More like a reminder. I kept that secret for 8 years. Not for her, never for her. I kept it because I didn't want to blow up the family. I didn't want to hurt my cousins. I didn't want to be the one who wrecked the church my mom felt safe in. So I carried it. Quietly. Pretending I didn't know who she really was. But when she stood up there last Sunday and humiliated me in front of half of Dayton, when she held my pain up like a prop and framed my job loss as divine punishment, something in me said, enough, because the thing she thought I'd forgotten, I didn't just remember it. I still had proof. When I stepped up to that mic after service ended, the room shifted. People were still moving toward the basement for coffee and donuts, but the second they realized I was speaking into the microphone, while the sanctuary was still full enough for echoes, everyone froze. But before I tell you what I said, you need to know how the days leading up to that Sunday went, because that's when everything really spiraled. After I got fired from the logistics job in Huber Heights, I crashed hard. I'd barely been in my new apartment for 3 months. Losing the job meant losing the apartment. Losing the apartment meant moving back in with my mom. And moving back in with my mom meant being under my aunt's shadow again. She didn't waste a second. The day after I told my mom what happened, my aunt showed up unannounced, walking into the house like she owned it. She hugged me in front of my mom, acting sympathetic, but the moment we stepped into the hallway, her voice dropped to that church lady whisper she uses when she's about to cut someone down. "You need to accept this humbling," she said. "You've been too prideful lately." I'd barely spoken 10 words since she got there, and somehow she diagnosed me with pride. Then she told me to send her my resume, so she could look it over and pray for opportunities. I didn't want to, but my mom kept hinting, begging me to let my aunt help. "She means well," my mom whispered as if she didn't hear the condescending comments. So I sent the resume. 3 days later, she took it to the entire congregation. But that wasn't even the worst part of the week. The escalation came on Friday night, 2 days before that sermon. That's when she called me to check in. I thought she might apologize. Instead, she asked if I could come help her organize some church files, because she was overwhelmed with administrative tasks. It sounded harmless enough. It wasn't. When I got to her office, she immediately started in on me. How I shouldn't have been living alone yet. How I should have been saving more money. How she worried I wasn't walking in obedience. It was nonstop judgment disguised as concern. But then she slipped. She said something that made everything click. She said, "Sometimes God has to strip you of things so you don't rise above your covering." I asked her what that meant. She smiled that tight little smile and said, "It means you need spiritual authority. You're safer when you're under me and your mother." You're not ready to stand on your own. That sentence sat in my chest like a brick. It wasn't spiritual guidance. It was control. And I realized she didn't want me independent. She didn't want me successful. She wanted me dependent, obedient, predictable. The kid who knew her secret and stayed quiet. I went home furious. My mom saw it. I almost told her everything right then. But she had a 12-hour shift in the morning and I didn't want to drop a bomb on her before bed. Then Sunday came. She used my resume like a sermon prop. She turned my pain into entertainment. She turned my setback into her lesson. She humiliated me publicly because she thought she had full ownership of my silence. And as I walked toward that microphone after service, something in me felt clearer than it had in years. I wasn't scared of her anymore. I wasn't protecting her image. I wasn't holding the family together by swallowing the truth. She'd pushed me too far. She'd escalated it. She'd made it public. She'd turned my life into a story. So I was about to give the church the real story. And she knew it. Her eyes locked on mine from halfway down the aisle. Her hand tightened around her Bible like she was about to sprint forward and snatch the mic away. But I beat her to it. I leaned in and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "There's something you all need to know about Pastor Denise." And you could have heard a pin drop. The moment those words left my mouth, "There's something you all need to know about Pastor Denise." The sanctuary went dead silent. Not church quiet. Not respectful quiet. I'm talking that heavy, electric stillness when everyone feels trouble coming and no one knows where to look. My aunt froze mid-step. She didn't even blink. Her choir members looked at her, then at me, then back at her again like they were watching a live accident. I kept my voice steady, because this time she wasn't controlling the narrative. "You said God used my failure as a lesson," I said. "But you forgot to mention the lesson you taught me 8 years ago in the church office." There was a ripple of whispers. Nobody knew what I was referring to, but she did. She took one step forward, forcing a smile so strained it looked painful. "Honey," she said, loud enough for the room, "if you need to talk, we can do it privately. The church doesn't need." Actually, I cut in, "They do." And then I told them. I told them about cleaning the office at the old community center. I told them about the envelope wedged behind the filing cabinet. I told them about the checks labeled for youth missions, youth retreats, community outreach signed over and cashed by her. There was a sharp gasp from the deacon board. Someone in the second row whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. My aunt stepped forward again, shaking her head, but her voice cracked as she spoke. "That's a misunderstanding. Those checks were—" "Don't lie," I said. "I still have photos." And I did. 8-year-old photos, taken on a cheap flip phone. Blurry but readable. I'd taken them without thinking, back when I didn't understand how messed up it was. I guess some part of me, some quiet part, had known I might need them one day. The reaction around the sanctuary was immediate. It wasn't just shock. It was betrayal. Deep, personal, collective betrayal. Because those weren't random donations. They were sacrifices. Parents skipping bills to send kids to that retreat. Old church ladies putting $5 a week into envelopes marked youth ministry. Young couples donating because they believed in something bigger than themselves. And she'd pocketed it. My aunt raised her voice suddenly, desperate, defensive. "Those funds went exactly where God directed." "No," I said. "They went into your personal account. The one you opened at Fifth Third Bank right after Uncle Derek left you." Her face collapsed. The whole church saw it. And then came the twist even I wasn't ready for. Because as people started murmuring, the head deacon, Brother James, a man who'd been with this church since before she ever stepped foot behind a pulpit, slowly stood up. His voice shook as he spoke, but not from fear. "Pastor," he said, "those checks were never reported on the annual financial statement." The room erupted. Not screaming, just a deep, horrified rumble of voices all firing at once. My aunt's eyes darted to the back doors. Panic flashed across her face. She'd lost control of the room. But the betrayal wasn't done. Because then Brother James added, voice breaking in real grief, "And if he's telling the truth, Then you lied to us about the youth retreat being canceled because the venue lost your paperwork. That hit harder than anything I could have said. People weren't looking at me anymore. They were staring at her, and she was shrinking. This wasn't just a reveal. It was exposure. Public, undeniable exposure. I thought she'd deny everything. Fight back. Scream. Pray. Speak in tongues. Something. But instead she whispered, barely audible, "You don't understand." And she looked at me with a hatred I'd never seen before. Because she realized something. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was her reputation, her authority, her power, and I had just cracked it open in front of the entire congregation. After I exposed the checks and Brother James backed me up, the sanctuary didn't go back to normal. People didn't file downstairs for coffee. Nobody moved at all. My aunt just stood there gripping her Bible like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face wasn't embarrassed, it was furious. But quiet furious. The kind that simmers behind the eyes. She didn't say another word. She turned, walked straight down the aisle, and disappeared into her office behind the pulpit. She didn't storm. She didn't shout. She didn't defend herself. She retreated. And that told me something important. She wasn't done. She was recalculating. My mom came up to me, pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. But before I could answer, two deacons walked over and asked if I'd be willing to speak privately with them later that week. I said yes. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because exposing her was only step one. I could feel it in my chest. My aunt wasn't the type to lie down and accept consequences. She was the type to strike back. Hard. Quietly. From places you don't expect. And she struck faster than I guessed. That night, around 11:30, she called. I shouldn't have picked up, but I did. Habit. Family guilt. I don't know. The second I said hello, she went off. Not yelling, but speaking in that clipped, vicious tone she uses when she wants to make someone feel small. "You have no idea what you've done," she said. "You have humiliated me. You have divided the church. You have wounded your own mother. All because you cannot accept correction." I almost laughed. Correction? That wasn't correction. That was public humiliation wrapped in scripture. Then she said something that made my whole body go cold. "You think those pictures are enough to ruin me? Baby, I have survived worse. And I can make you look like a bitter, unstable boy who lost his job and lashed out." I didn't respond, but she wasn't done. "You live in my community. You depend on my reputation. Don't forget that." She was threatening me. Not directly, not openly, but clearly. She ended the call with, "Pray for clarity. You'll realize you made a mistake." I sat on my bed afterward, angry but also understanding something for the first time. She wasn't afraid of the truth. She was afraid of losing control. And if she was going to fight dirty, then I needed to think ahead. Plan. Prepare. Protect my mom. Protect myself. The next morning, I went into full retaliation planning. Not to destroy her, but to make sure she couldn't twist things and turn it back on me. First, I printed out the photos of the checks, zoomed in copies, dates, endorsements, everything. Then I contacted one of the deacons who'd asked to meet. He set up a meeting for Wednesday night at the church with the full board. Second, I went to Fifth Third Bank, the same branch I remembered from the endorsement stamp, and asked if they could confirm account numbers from the copies. They couldn't give details, privacy laws, but the woman at the desk looked at the photos, looked at me, and quietly said, "These checks were deposited into a personal account." That alone was enough. Third, I checked the old laptop stored in my mom's garage, the one I used at 19 when I first took those photos. And that's when I found something I completely forgot about. A saved folder. Title: Youth Retreat, Budget Inside. Emails between her and the event venue. And one email thread where the event coordinator asked her why she canceled at the last minute even though the church had paid a deposit. The twist? She wrote back claiming church financial hardship and asked for the deposit back. But she never told the congregation any of that. That wasn't neglect. That wasn't forgetfulness. That was intentional. With everything compiled, I realized something else. something that settled into my bones like ice. I wasn't just proving she misused funds. I was proving she lied repeatedly to keep money meant for kids, to build her own empire, to create the identity she clung to like oxygen. And now I had the whole picture. But even with all of that, even with the evidence stacked higher than anything she could pray her way out of, I still couldn't shake a feeling in my gut. A feeling that she had one more move left. Because my aunt was dangerous in the way only someone with community influence and religious authority can be. And she was about to show exactly how far she'd go to keep her power. By the time Wednesday night rolled around, the night I was supposed to meet with the full church board, I felt strangely calm. Not confident. Not relieved. Just steady. Like all the chaos of the last week had burned off the part of me that second-guessed everything. My mom wanted to come with me, but I told her she didn't need to get dragged into it. She looked heartbroken, worried, guilty, but she let me go alone. I pulled into the church parking lot around 6:45. The board meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock. The lot looked fuller than usual for a weekday. More cars than I expected. I felt a pinch of nerves but kept walking. When I stepped inside the church foyer, something felt off. Too quiet, too still, like the air was holding its breath. Then I heard voices down the hallway, the boardroom area near the pastor's office. I headed toward it, gripping the folder of evidence under my arm. But right before I turned the corner, I stopped, because I heard my name, not whispered, not quietly discussed, said out loud. And then my aunt's voice, but she wasn't scared or upset. She sounded in control. "Let me speak plainly," she said. "My nephew is struggling emotionally. He's been unstable since losing his job. I've been trying to guide him, but he's spiraling." A low murmur of agreement came from at least two people. I recognized one voice, Deacon Harold, a man who always worshipped her leadership like it was gospel. My heart thudded. I stepped closer, quietly. My aunt continued. "He imagined financial misconduct where there was none. These photos he claims to have, they're manipulated. He's always been good with computers." I almost choked. I barely knew how to reset a router. But she said it like it was fact. Then she added, calm, steady, rehearsed. "He needs prayer, not punishment. He needs compassion, not confrontation." There weren't gasps or pushback, just silence. Heavy, believing silence. She wasn't defending herself. She was building a narrative. One that painted me as unstable, bitter, mentally fragile. And she wasn't done. "I'm asking the board," she said, "to meet with him gently tonight, not to interrogate him. And after that, I'll be requesting a temporary restraining order on behalf of the church if he continues spreading lies." My body went cold. A restraining order? Against me? Filed by the church? That would follow me for years. Jobs, housing, everything would get harder. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was trying to bury me. The next voice I heard made my stomach drop. It was Brother James, the same deacon who'd backed me up Sunday. "Pastor," he said carefully. He sounded sane to me, and the photos he showed looked real. My aunt's voice sharpened. "He played you. He used your trust. He's been dealing with resentment toward me for a long time. This is misplaced anger." Then her tone softened, dripping with manufactured sadness. "I love that boy. I raised him. But the truth is, he's hurting. And hurt people lash out." The room murmured again. This time deeper, heavier. She almost had them. She was flipping the entire situation upside down. I leaned closer to the wall, feeling my pulse in my jaw. That's when I heard another voice. Quiet, shaky. "Pastor, didn't you cancel the youth retreat after the deposit was paid?" My aunt's answer came fast. Too fast. "Those records were incorrect. We had accounting issues at the time. It was sorted. A lie. Smooth. Effortless." And that's when it hit me. Really hit me. She had been preparing this narrative long before Sunday. Long before I stepped up to that mic. She'd been anticipating I might speak out someday. She'd already planted seeds in people's minds. About my job loss. About my attitude. About my emotional state. She'd been framing me as unstable for weeks, maybe months. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. That was the twist. I thought exposing her was the climax. But she'd been playing a longer game. She wasn't reacting to me. She'd been preparing for war. And when I finally stepped into the doorway, the entire board turned to look at me. My aunt smiled calmly, like she'd already won. When I stepped fully into the boardroom doorway, my aunt's whole posture shifted. Her shoulders squared, chin lifted, expression calm enough to pass as concern. But her eyes were hard and flat, like she'd already decided how this was going to end. The board members, 8 of them, looked torn. Some relieved I'd arrived, some confused, some already leaning toward her version. The tension in that little room was thick enough to choke on. I didn't say anything yet. I just closed the door behind me and sat down in the empty chair opposite her. I laid my folder on the table but didn't open it. My aunt folded her hands and spoke first, using that gentle, fake pastor voice she saves for funerals and manipulation. "Baby," she said softly, "we're here because we love you." I didn't respond. She continued, "I know the job loss has been hard, but dragging up old misunderstandings, that isn't the answer. The devil attacks when we're vulnerable." I actually laughed. A short, quiet, disbelieving laugh. She went still. "Denise," I said, dropping the title on purpose, "stop pretending this is about my emotions. Tell them the real reason you're fighting so hard to shut me up." Her jaw barely twitched, but it was enough. Brother James leaned forward. "Pastor, I think we deserve to hear your explanation." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, cold and flat, like she was sizing up the exact way to break me. Then she spoke. Not to me, but to the room. "You all know what I've gone through. When Derek left me, the church was small, struggling. I had nothing. No home of my own, no savings, no stability. I poured everything into this ministry. Everything." Her voice thickened, not with emotion, but with calculation. "You know this church wouldn't exist if I hadn't sacrificed. And sometimes, leadership requires difficult decisions. Decisions the congregation isn't ready to understand." The board members exchanged worried glances. I felt my stomach twist, because I knew what she was doing. She was warming them up for the truth, but her truth, the version where she was the victim of circumstance, not the architect of deliberate harm. Then she finally said it. "Those funds, those checks, they were redirected because I needed them to survive. I needed them to keep the church alive. I needed them because I was abandoned." My breath caught. Not because of the confession. I'd already known she'd taken the money. But because of the next part. She leaned back, voice dropping into a chilling, almost matter-of-fact tone. "Every time someone donated to those youth programs, I saw people who admired me, trusted me, believed I was called. And if they saw me fail, if they saw how close I was to losing everything, they would have left." She looked around the room, eyes sharp as glass. "You don't understand what it feels like to be one mistake away from losing the only thing making you worth anything." The room went silent. Then she looked directly at me. "You think I hurt you? You think I humiliated you?" Her voice lowered, stripped of the sweetness she used in the sanctuary. "I did what I did because I couldn't afford to be weak. Not for 1 second. If people start seeing your flaws, they start questioning your authority. And when they question authority, they walk away. I couldn't let that happen. Not again." It hit me like a punch to the chest. She didn't steal out of desperation. She didn't steal because she thought it was justified. She didn't steal because she was grieving her divorce. She stole because fear of vulnerability had eaten her alive. She stole because the idea of being ordinary, human, imperfect terrified her. She stole because she wanted control more than integrity, more than community, more than the truth. And when she used my job loss as a sermon, when she mocked me in front of the church, that wasn't misguided tough love. It was strategy. A calculated message. I'm in control. I decide the narrative. And I will use anyone, family included, to keep my power intact. There was no remorse in her voice. No regret. Not even shame. just cold justification. And in that moment, the entire room finally saw who she really was. Not a spiritual leader, not a woman of God, not a victim of hard times. A scared, selfish, manipulative woman who built her identity by feeding off the trust of others and crushing anyone who threatened that fragile empire. I knew then there was no fixing her, no forgiving her, no reasoning with her, only exposing her completely, and I was done holding back. When she finished speaking, when she laid out that cold, calculated truth about needing control more than honesty, the room didn't erupt. Nobody shouted. Nobody prayed. Nobody defended her. It was worse than that. The board just sat there, frozen, staring at her like they were seeing a stranger wearing her face. So I finally opened the folder. No theatrics, no raised voice, just quiet, steady truth. These aren't misunderstandings, I said. These are copies of checks signed over to your personal account. These are emails showing you requested the retreat deposit refund. These are bank endorsement stamps. And these, I slid out the printed timeline, show the exact dates the youth donations were taken and when your personal expenses went up. She flinched at that last part, because one of those expenses was the down payment on her new SUV, the one she told the church was a gift from God. The board passed the pages around. The more they read, the less they blinked. When the last page landed in Brother James's hands, he pressed his lips together, closed the folder, and looked straight at her. "Pastor," he said, voice shaking with betrayal, "you didn't just take money. You lied to us. You lied to the entire congregation." My aunt didn't respond. She just stared at me with pure hatred. Hatred carved from the fact that she finally, officially, couldn't control the story anymore. The board dismissed her from the room. She refused to leave at first, then stormed out so fast the door slammed against the wall. Once she was gone, the board's tone changed. They weren't confused anymore. They weren't hesitant. They were angry and embarrassed and ready to act. They asked if I'd be willing to provide everything formally. I said yes. They asked if I'd give a statement to their accountant and an outside investigator. I said yes. They asked if the photos were mine and if I'd testify to taking them. I said yes. And when the meeting ended, Brother James put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You were right to come forward. Don't let anyone tell you different." I walked out to the parking lot feeling lighter, not happy, not relieved, but free in a way I hadn't felt in years. The next 10 days moved fast. The board suspended her. Then they froze all church accounts. Then they hired an outside auditor. Then they announced a congregational emergency meeting. People were stunned, hurt, angry, but they weren't confused, because the board didn't sugarcoat it. They told the congregation exactly what happened. They showed the documents, the timeline, the financial discrepancies. They told the truth she spent years dodging. My aunt didn't show her face. By the end of the week, she'd resigned for health reasons. But the board released a follow-up statement clarifying that her resignation did not absolve her of ongoing financial review. Translation: she didn't get to run away. The congregation voted to remove her permanently. The auditor's report found significant financial misconduct over multiple years, and the board filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office. I didn't push for prison. I didn't have to. Her empire collapsed all on its own. My mom cried when she heard everything. Not because she pitied my aunt, but because she finally understood the weight I'd been carrying. She apologized for not seeing it sooner. I told her she didn't need to. She hugged me so tight it felt like I finally had a parent protecting me again. In the end, I didn't lose my reputation. She lost hers. And every time she tried to twist the narrative, facts beat lies. Cleanly, publicly, conclusively. I didn't humiliate her. I didn't sermonize her. I didn't weaponize her pain the way she weaponized mine. I just told the truth. And the truth was enough to bring down the kingdom she built on other people's trust. My job loss didn't break me, freed me, and now that my life is finally my own again, let's just say this: if God wanted to teach a life lesson that Sunday, He picked the wrong example.